Right. We'll start. Good evening, everybody, for turning out on such a miserable night. Apologies for absence, there are none. We don't have to worry about whether we accept or otherwise. That moves us straight on to interests. Any disclosable pecuniary interests? Any other interests? I suppose I should probably declare that my wife is a member of the Choral Society, bearing in mind that they have a grant application before us. Minutes of the meeting, held as long ago now as the 12th of December, have been circulated. Present myself, Councillor Clark, Councillors Hutton, Wade and Arnold. Somebody who's there like to propose those? Unless there are any amendments. Wade, Councillor Clark, those in favour? Seems to be everybody. That takes us on to representations from interested parties, and I assume there are not, since the room is devoid of anybody other than ourselves. Consideration of requests from interested parties, similarly nothing, which means that we're already into the second half of the meeting. I feel it might take a little longer than the first half. First bit is to receive the accounts for January. It is simply to receive, unless anybody has any queries and wants to take advantage of the fact that Paul is here, hopefully undoubtedly be able to answer. Complete silence, I'll take that as we're happy. And the next one, similarly, is a receive-only item, so that's to receive the internal control checklist for the third quarter. Again, unless anybody has any comments or observations, simply thanks to those who did it. Right, that takes us into, which is in essence the first substantive piece of the meeting, which is to consider the financial risk assessment. The idea being that we look at it at this juncture and recommend a final of this go to full council. This is not a new document because we've done it before.
No.
I can't, off the top of my head, remember when we last did.
There's a couple of things that when I had a look at it this afternoon, I thought it might be worth changing. The precept, first item, it says approved precept at the meeting in January, but in actual fact, January is used as if we haven't been able to sort it out in December.
Yes,
so
we've taken to doing it in December, haven't we? Which takes a certain amount of pressure off to do it then. So that sounds fairly sensible to amend January to December. Which only reflects our current practice, isn't it?
And then I've also changed charges for community hall, so invoices for room hire. It had got the register, but we haven't got a register, we use a booking system. So I've just put ensure payments received. Oh, actually that should say received against the booking system. So you're looking at that rather than a register. We haven't got a register.
Seems logical.
And again, seems distinctly uncontroversial.
And then just a couple of others where it says as head of chair of estates, I've changed to estates committee because it's normally review of leases and rentals, and I think rental invoices and terms and conditions for inspections and market pitch sizes would happen by the committee, not the chair of the estates.
Yes. I suppose if we refer to the estate management committee to look at it, probably a slightly ponderous title. But you're right, it should be the committee rather than the chair.
And then where it says charges of commercial premises, it's got direct debit payments. And it says accounts are reviewed monthly, but the direct debits are reviewed and approved annually, aren't they? So I've just put reviewed annually.
Straightforward.
All of those, I think, meet with approval. Councillor Wayne,
Yeah, I've got
do you want to contribute something different?
no, I'm not going to agree with everything that Emma said. I'm going to add some bits just for consideration. Under charges for community halls, I wonder if there's an additional risk. Because at the moment, Queen Victoria Hall relies on the council for a subsidy. If the council runs out of money, I can't see it happening, so it's a very low risk. But if there's not enough income for Queen Victoria Hall, that's a risk. So I think it should be added.
Before we sort of go through, I'm just thinking about that one. I mean, you could argue that the risk is the risk to the Queen Victoria Hall Trust rather than to the council. The risk will have already happened to us because we're reforming us.
Actually, that's fair.
Yeah, so I'm not sure that actually
It should be in this one, it should be in the QEH.
we don't know whether we have a QBH risk assessment.
No, and I think, obviously we talk about precepts, but paying bills and hall hire under this risk assessment is almost like you're including all of our properties. So, like we did with insurance, I think we possibly should say at the top of this, Arundel Town Council and Queen Victoria Hall, and then it covers both.
Sure,
Other questions? You've mentioned Michael Charles that should be the Estates Committee. Are they going to review and report, or is it just to review and take no action? For rental invoices, for example. And same with review and charges for commercial premises, review of rental and leases, chair of estates, now estates committee to oversee. That by itself is not enough. We should have a report to say that it's fine.
Yes, I must admit, I think that it's implicit in the word oversee, okay? But no particular problem with extending it.
I also think, in the same way that we've got earlier on, the council review signed monthly by two councillors, that should be the same surely for unauthorised use of car. Is that a responsibility, Emma, you will know better, Paul, you will know better, is that a responsibility of you, Emma, or is that a responsibility of the verification people? Is that?
Well, I think it's part of the internal control. So we've got a procedure in place that I oversee. So when people use the card, they tell me that they're using it and they make a note of what they're using it for. And obviously then we pass the information on to Paul. And
We've already
also,
got that as an internal control, I think.
yeah, but then obviously they've got the verification officers that are here to go through the accounts, so if you saw something that you thought was.
So do you think we need to add anything into the mitigation column or the council actions column to say that they are reviewed by councillors?
Sorry, whereabouts is that? And
This is
authorised use of
under
card.
payments, yeah.
So I'll give you, organisation form.
The last one on this particular report, and I do think this is a risk, is use of section 106 monies. We talked about this earlier on in the year, and there's a risk that we don't use them. we don't have any, or we didn't have any regular review of Section 106 monies where they're going to be spent, when they had to be spent by, and if they're not spent, my understanding is the money has to go back to the developer with interest. To me, that's a risk. And although at the last but one council meeting, or FGP meeting, I can't remember which actually, we said we'd review those Section 106 monies 6 monthly. So the risk is now managed, which is good. I think it ought to be on the risk register.
I agree with that. I think that's sensible. I mean, again, it reflects what is now our new practice, but it certainly wasn't there before. I mean, it hasn't been picked up by the auditor, but I think it's been picked up by ourselves as a weakness. And yes, I think that's probably fair.
Line items, I don't know whether is this only looked at biannually? Biannually, I should say.
What this
This was
represents?
approved on February 22.
It's approved, it's looked at annually.
Okay, so I guess it would be 23, and this is the 24 risk assessment.
Something else on that? Sorry, I think we were all waiting to see. Right, anybody else got any observations, requests for review? So with those various
Yeah,
relatively
can we just go
minor
through that
amendments,
again as to exactly what wording you want to put in and
what for the section 106?
What I've suggested is that the topic is Section 106 monies. The risk identified is that monies are not used and therefore facilities are not improved.
Would this go under other risks?
Funds are-
Sorry?
Would this go under other risks?
I would put this at the end under that.
at the end.
I think it's a medium risk at the moment because it's a new process we've got in place, so we need to make sure we get it right. The management of risk is a half-yearly report to the Finance and General Purposes Committee and then to full council. I've got it all written down here so I can pass it over to you. I don't really need to vote on it. Under staff action, I think it's just diarised as with others. Full council action is full council to accept the 6-monthly report.
Just a really minor point, if it's not too inconvenient, would it be useful to put some section numbers on? Just in mind, when trying to identify points.
Oh, sorry, I can't quite hear.
Sorry,
what
I said, would it be helpful if we put some section numbers on? There's no numbering on it at the moment. It's a minor point, if it's a lot of work, then don't worry about it, but if you are going to be editing the document, would it be helpful to put some section numbering on?
It's sort of somewhat easier to just say go to point 17.
Yeah, that's my thinking, right?
Yeah, I mean, it could be done.
I've been struggling to try and find the bits.
So we've got under income, so you have precept 1, charges 2,
You preset one,
charges 3, yeah.
preset
no, that's
1,
fine.
1.1, 1.2, 1.3 or whatever,
And then move on to
Yeah, that's-
expenditure, and then obviously other would be another. So
Yeah.
I've got,
So income preset would be 1.1, income charges community halls would be 1.2. Don't you need to number every line, but each of the headings gets a new number. Yeah, if it's not too much work.
Right, subject to,
right, so we've got can we just clarify this section 106? So that's going to be another risk that we're adding.
Yeah.
And are we saying it's low, medium, or?
I would say medium at the moment because it's a new process. And I think it will become low because we'll get used to the process, used to the half-yearly report.
And so the management of the risk is to review the section 106.
It's a F&GP to review half-yearly.
Yeah.
And then the council action is for council to accept.
I'm saying biannually.
Yeah.
So staff action is to arrange
Just
to be
diarise.
on, yeah. councillors to approve the review. Yeah, now, what about the QVH? Shall we just say that we change the title to Town Council, Victoria Hall, Risk Assessment and Financial Management?
I wonder if we do, because the QVH have different risks than the council, because it has people in, so it's got the risk of health and safety stuff that needs to be incorporated. So my immediate view is we ought to put QVH as a separate risk assessment. This is just for the council.
Yeah, that's fine, yeah.
We can just put a note to this, that in fact it doesn't include Queen Victoria Hall Trust. And then we can have a separate risk assessment document. You know, it's yet more paper, but actually I think Councillor Red's right, it probably is a better way of handling it.
Just to clarify, this one for our town council, the reason we do it in February is so we can get it reviewed before the end of the financial year, because that was one of the things that the internal auditor will pick up on. As with regards to Queen Victoria Hall, I think it would be good that it has its set, financial risk assessment, but obviously we're not governed to have to sort that out in the next month, but it is something that I think perhaps should. A lot of things on here would be similar, because of how it runs, but it may need something in there with regards to the grant coming from out of the town council.
I think we just put that on the next QVH agenda.
Yeah, the next meeting's on the 19th of March, so I could have a look at this document and tweak it and then bring it to that meeting. See
If you were able to, that would be helpful. I suspect we probably need to sort of formally propose those various amendments. I'll do that from the chair and ask for somebody to second it. Councillor Wade. All those in favour of making that recommendation? Thank you. The next document is somewhat complementary to the first, because this is the internal control policy document, which again is described as having been adopted on the 15th of February. I suspect that that simply means that when we looked at it in 2023, we saw no reason to alter it.
Yeah.
Probably should, under those circumstances, just mark it reviewed with the date, so that we don't suddenly look at it and think, oh, goodness, we haven't touched this for 5 years or something. Anne-Marie, are you suggesting any
I haven't suggested any different
revisions to this?
to this one.
Anybody else have any immediate thoughts?
Some criticisms, it looked very solid and complete. So I suppose we can happily wave it on.
Others happy to do so? Very good. And that takes us to the effectiveness of the internal audit review document.
Just before we do, can I just check that, we said we'd had a review date on the.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, got that.
Yes, so the effectiveness of internal audit review document is a bit of a mouthful. You'll notice that on the bottom of this one, it says reviewed and accepted, and then it follows it through. And because I assume that this is the one that was produced for last year, the last date on it seems to be 2022, but presumably when we produce it in 2024, it'll have a 2023 date on it, if that doesn't sound too convoluted. And again, these things are interlinked rather. Again, Emma, is there anything on here where
I've not
you think
changed
we have a
anything.
need to change it?
I think in February 22 we changed quite a bit, and obviously this is for the internal audit that we have done by Montpans Camp, this document. I mean, the only thing I will say that I think financial regulations are being reviewed at the minute with a view to a new financial regulation, so that could throw all of this up in the air, but I don't think we're going to get that this financial year, I think it would be at some point.
If we do, we'll have to cope with it, but, yeah. Well, just with that in the back of our minds, is there anything else in here where we think it needs to change, or indeed anything that isn't here which I think should be added? I must confess I didn't spot anything, which is perhaps relatively reassuring because it suggests we've kind of got it right. Absent anything else on that, I can hardly believe this video, which we seem to be getting through this. That seems to bring us out of the financial matters and into the grant application on behalf of the Elgin District Choral Society. I couldn't help but notice that the material that they sent included material relating to the last production, which
Well, that's what I added on, but they have sent that to me, because we now ask for evidence or, a report on.
yes. Well, I could have given it because I was actually at that concert. It was very well attended. But as councillors will have noted, very well attended it might have been, profitable, sadly, it was not, because they do try to keep the ticket prices reasonably down. What is more difficult seems to be to keep the expenditure down. Clearly that varies given the nature of the productions, because if you looked at the figures for the two concerts, autumn and spring, whilst the incomes were broadly similar, the expenditure on one was about 75% higher than on the other, because we spent £2,000 odd pounds on the orchestra as opposed to £850. And again, soloists were more than twice. They were, as I recall it, very good. What is perhaps noticeable about the figures that they produced is that their income and their expenditure are within a hair's breadth of each other. But I suppose it is also fair to point out that their reserves are almost equivalent to about a year's expenditure. So they carry a somewhat higher reserve than the council does, because we tend to think in terms of keeping at least a quarter's money by way of reserve. I think it's fair to say that when they do these productions, they do tend to acknowledge the role of the town council in supporting it. It certainly meets the objective of supporting the cultural life of the town, and they are currently hard at work preparing for their spring production. Except they've got half term this week, so my wife wasn't there on Monday, but any questions, comments? That's all right,
Questions none, comments. Given that they carry a very satisfactory reserve and that they're doing excellent work, the cultural enlightenment of Arundel as a whole, and will keep some of the youngsters out of mischief, encouraging them to sing and join it. Therefore, I'm inclined this year to give them what they're asking for.
yes, I think it might be fair to say that the number of youngsters who participate. There are certainly a number of our older citizens who are involved in it.
Indeed, yes.
So perhaps a number of the youngsters, although they do often get good support from Arundel School, in terms of musicians, for example, from school.
And I'm sure, if I can drop a second, please, your permission, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Clark will confirm that support from Arundel School pupils doesn't come encouraged by 3-line whips.
I couldn't possibly comment on that.
Well, of course, there is a healthy difference between encouragement from the HSMs and compulsion.
Of course.
Always.
And looking at Paul's helpful kind of spreadsheet, it's a group that we have supported most years, not quite all. And last year, we actually did give them 750. Prior to that, it had been £500 on 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 previous occasions. 750 is what they've asked for on this occasion. I suspect it probably was what they asked for last time and received the request. Councillor Reichelt has suggested that we do fund it. Do you have any other comments, opposing views, or support?
Oh, well.
Do you want to propose then that we do it?
Who will second?
I'm happy to second it.
Carried unanimously.
All those in favour? We'll just show it. It is indeed.
Like the Supreme Saviour.
Can I just make a sort of slightly wider point? I mean, I'm not sure whether we actually have any criteria for what we think does constitute a cause worthy of support. I mean, I'm not suggesting the first or second isn't, but I'm not totally sure whether we've got anywhere any sort of guidelines that we should or shouldn't do. But I'm conscious that that when I'm not intimately familiar with this, but I know from when I've been involved with Creative Admiral, when they're considering asking for grant funding, they're usually quite clear criteria about what we're going to be able to attract funding, and often it's to do with supporting disadvantaged communities or youth or education, rather than a diverse or maybe not so diverse group of people in the community. And I just wonder whether we should perhaps have a bit more of a policy.
We do have a policy. There is a policy.
Okay, that's good. That's
Okay.
good to know.
It focuses
And does it?
community sport, arts and sports. There are general principles below that about people living around the Amber area positively.
So in which case it would meet all those criteria.
So we could finesse that, but we do have a policy website.
Well, I'm sure I must have read it at some point, but thank you for reminding me.
It's not sport, I suppose.
I think we reviewed it, not that long ago, yeah.
So I don't remember it being looked at at the time I've been on this committee.
It's dated 2019, but I think we've looked at it
That's
since then.
I do remember actually, to your point, Jerry, last year asking whether there were any criteria, and I thought at that stage, somebody said it's a look and feel thing. If it feels right, we'll do it.
I was pointing to that.
Yes, I think so. If that's there, then that's fine. Then I just want to develop Jerry's very valid point, which is thinking ahead. If at any stage we had to reduce our grant budget and we had a surplus of requests for our funding and support from the council, there ought to be some criteria which allows us to, as objectively as possible, judge grant applications rather than it feels right.
What I think therefore might be helpful is if for the next meeting, we put a review of that policy on the agenda so that the policy can be circulated, remind those who've forgotten it, stroke those who were never familiar with it in the first place, and those of us who probably assume we know it and perhaps don't entirely remember it. I mean, it is somewhat difficult because the brief is so wide in talking about community, arts, sports. It does, in a sense, it doesn't leave a lot out. About the only thing we don't do is support charities
for charity's sake, as it were. In other words, we don't simply make donations to any particular charity. I know some councils, for example, the mayors will have a charity and then run various charity events. As a council, we tended not to do that, with the notable exception last year of the mayor's quiz, as I recall. But
I mean, I think it has the line, along the lines of, you know, the decision is down to the finance
Yeah,
committee.
there's a set of criteria which is not exhaustive, and all applications are treated case by case, but the big banner is they'll deliver, applications deliver a benefit to some or all of the people living in the parish of Arundel, and it should either directly or indirectly positively promote the parish. Then it also says that there are finite pots and lots of grants. If there's too many grant applications, then many won't be met in full. So it sort of broadly covers what we're talking about, but I'm sure we can.
So that's how we look at it formally. I mean, A, it might be useful for ourselves, B, it's always worth actually then going out to people and saying, we've recently looked at our grants budget again, and potentially encouraging, because the next financial year is creeping up on us fairly soon, so we might want to encourage applications.
it's just a thought goes through my mind that if we had 20,000 to spend and we had £20,000 worth of applications, and frankly, anything that comes to Hanbury will at least have some benefit for a subset of Hanbury ratepayers. If we get £20,000 worth of applications in the first 3 months, we've got 9 months of saying no.
It has always actually been one of the challenges that if you put your grant application in at the beginning of the year, there's always the risk that we look at it and say, we'll scale back what we'll give you because we don't want to run out of money. And then we get to this time of the year and we're thinking, gosh, there's not quite enough money in the grants budget. But there we are. There isn't an obvious solution to that one, other than making it a once-a-year thing. But that really wouldn't be helpful to organisations in the town.
I mean, you could do it like biannually, because you do it after 6 months of budget, but even then, for some people, I mean, that they're excluded because of.
Well, what we do know, almost, we don't know, but what I think we should be able to presume is that we're not the only funding body that will have this issue at stake. So let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's see what other people do and see if there's anything there that will be useful for us.
Yes, I'm not sure what other councils locally do, for example.
Good question.
We could, I suppose we could ask Malcolm whether, they have any particular guidance for councils, or whether they're aware of other councils having budget pot like ours, for example, maybe not. I don't know. Right, well that was a.
I've added that in as any other business to report on agenda item for next month, because obviously that wasn't on the agenda.
No, it wasn't. It just evolved down to a discussion. Right, any other matters for report? Councillor Arnold?
No.
Councillor Wade? No. Councillor Arnold? No. Councillor Tom? No. Nothing from me. Paul? Anything from you? No, that must have been one of your quietest meetings ever. Yeah.
It's been
Yeah.
I don't really believe it. After 35 minutes, the meeting closed.
Okay.